So just taking a moment to extend some gratitude to yourself, to the Buddha, to the Dharma, to the Sangha. So this beginning by just bringing the attention to your posture, exploring it from the inside. And then this practice of attending to the body, just as we will extend to the mind and to the heart. So just attending first to the feet, whether you're in a chair or on a bench or sitting cross-legged. Just giving yourself permission to feel the play of the elements of earth, air, water, and fire, as those are how we feel, how we know things. So we know there's a sense of fluidity in the water element, a sense of heat or cold in the fire element, a sense of solidity or movement uh, in the air element, and a sense of fluidity and noting the cohesion and the fluidity within the body of the water element. So just noting these are primary elements, and they can be known by us through their property or their experience. Then giving yourself a moment just to feel the body in its wholeness from the toes to the crown of the head. And you can just note there's the breathing that's happening. The breath in the body. So whether it's the expansion or the contraction as you breathe in and breathe out. And the practice is just the knowing of it, the bare experience. And the body is felt. And you can note that the mind in its nature can wander off very, very easily to the past or present or future. And our practice is to note it and then bring our attention back to the body breath. And the nature of your mind is actually to wander off. And the nature of this practice is simply to start again, reestablish that mindfulness, that awareness. And letting the body and the breath settle. And eventually the mind will settle some. And depending on your day, it may have its own process. And then attending to the heart. Just to acknowledge that this word kindness is indicative in the human condition. So there is body awareness. There is the awareness of the mind wandering off and coming back, and the heart. You can simply stay with the body or note the rising and falling of the breath. You can notice yourself wandering off, or you can notice what is holding all of this. As big as this room and bigger. that that knows, the awareness itself, sati. In its nature, it knows how to let go of any phenomena, whether it's a thought or sensation, a feeling. What is it that's holding all this? you find yourself wandering off, start again. Sit in the center of this body, this breath, these thoughts, these feelings, all in this vast open space. You can notice there's no really inside or outside. There is just this open space. Awareness without limits, holding what's in front of you, behind you, each side of you, above you and below you. Freeing any thoughts, memories, plans, feelings. Ultimately, you're being held by this awareness. It's not you or me or anything personal. It just is. And you can rest in that just is. again in these last few minutes of sitting. Just be fully attentive for one breath, one moment, one sensation, one thought, one feeling. All arise. But immediately just let go of it and stay in the center of yourself. So for those of you on Zoom, we just ended the meditation. I know the bell doesn't come through. And we're going to take just a 5-minute stretch break here in silence and just see if you can't stay with the practice itself. So there is the intention to get up, there's the getting up, there is going to the bathroom or getting a cup of tea or water, going outside or stretching. Stay present. See if you can't do that. It's a great gift to yourself. So we've been working with these 5 working with? No, is that wrong? Exploring. How's that a better word? Okay. Uh, these 5, they are, in a sense, we've been doing it for a while. They're powers, the powers that allow us to see through a lot of times the process or the practice of, or the addiction to identity. You all know who you are, right? And you also don't know who you are. So it is paradoxical, but that's Buddhism. It is just full of paradox. And, these 5 of being, and tonight we're doing a really important one. It's called wisdom. I thought, oh my God, that's too big for me, you know, but I'll play with it. It's still a necessary, it's a necessary understanding. I love the uh, Nisargadatta, the Indian master who lived in Mumbai, Bombay, and his comment was, "Wisdom tells me I'm nothing, and love tells me I'm everything. And somewhere between the two, my life flows. Wisdom tells me I'm nothing. Love tells me I'm everything. And somewhere between the two, my life flows." Not bad, huh? You know. So a part of this whole thing around wisdom is that it's, you can say one thing, oh, it takes maturity because it is when I talk about the five horses, the mindfulness, there's faith, and there's wisdom, and there is energy and concentration. Those are the five. And wisdom is almost in its category of its own because it is something that uh, we talk about this as the middle way. And so it is understanding the middle way in a way that uh, we have experienced or know somewhat the extremes. And so now we come back to this kind of central part of how things happen. And we begin to see that there is what we're looking at. And this is the deceptive thing. It's it's such a dualistic thing that we're sitting in. There is the objects of awareness, and these are your senses, the seeing, the smelling, the tasting, the hearing, the thinking, the identifying, um, the emoting, liking or disliking. This is just the in some ways you could say it's the way it is. And the function here is that somehow the middle way, we have experienced the extremes on some level. At least I have. I know I suspect others have too here. And that now we look for what is the middle way, and how does the middle way inform us of how we're identifying or seeing. A lot of this is, so much of it is based on the fact that we are these amazing creatures that can think. And I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but anyway, we can do that. And therefore we can imagine and we can make up things. It's quite remarkable. Uh, and at the same time, it's kind of twicky, you know. This is from Garchen Rinpoche. When thoughts appear, neither reject nor accept them. Do not try to stop thoughts. Allow them to arise, but recognize their arising and do not pursue them. That's the trick. Do not pursue them. The goal is not to not have thoughts, but for thoughts to arise and yet be rendered powerless. You must habituate this. Then later, when the negative thoughts and emotions arise, you will not fall under their power. The energy of these thoughts may arise, but will not affect you in one way or another way. Sometimes in meditation, there will be times when there are actual no thoughts. That in that instant, you will know that this is the true nature of your own mind. The mind that abides like space, vivid and empty, open, not grasping at anything. This alert awareness must be upheld throughout all activities. So do not try to stop thoughts. Just relax into the nature of awareness. Whenever you meditate, our minds will be together. Dorchen Rinpoche. And I think in so many ways, we've we talk about wisdom. It's not so much about getting lost or some kind of empowerment or something. It's really just this very thing of relaxing and staying in the center. And we will be stimulated. That's I think our life, by likes and dislikes. And they are kind of the they are our friends, but they also can be that creates the delusion or deception. And our job is to identify when there is that contraction or that we, it's simple. I think one of the beauties in the Vipassana practice is being able to name it. Oh, I'm sad. Oh, I'm excited. Oh, I'm afraid. Oh, I'm in love. You know, all these things then have a reflection, and that they are something that then is known by us. And this is the art. If it's known by us, then the possibility of us acting foolishly is much less likely. I'm not saying we won't, it's just likely, you know. And so a person, begins to, and this is the thing, this is the art. You've been here, I, you know, this last week. A lot of this is the mind has to turn around on itself. So it's not looking out anymore so much, because the real thing is here is 100%, 100%. So 100% is looking out and identifying maybe problems or solutions or something. And then we can turn inward and also see what the reactive uh, mind and emotion is doing. And this is the art, is somehow finding a place in the middle, you know. And then if we can find that place in the middle, then we won't be deceived so easily. I say so easily because sometimes emotions are really strong. And because emotions are based on stimulus that comes at us and also our belief systems. And our belief systems are tricky, and because in some ways they can take what's true and kind of warp it into the way we expect it to be. And I'm sorry, that's not the way it works. We can't manipulate it into that. It's just that there is a possibility of seeing how it truly is, how it functions um, without deception, you know. And again, it goes back to the principles here. What are the principles? Very simply, we have these precepts, of how do we act and how do we judge others through their actions, and when they are maybe uh, not so skillful, can we not judge them, or can we bring kindness and some heart uh, to them, you know? Is that possible? And then for ourselves, that we know that these are powerful tools. And I remember Ajahn Amaro, one of the teachers. He's in England now, and he used to talk about uh, walking on the side of a cliff on a path, and that the problem was that those precepts, and there's fog. So you really have to be careful where you're stepping because it's easy to fall off. And that's really too, there's a way he was describing the precepts as this easy place to fall off, whether it's, because it's, what are they? It's just, uh, non-harming is a very simple one on some levels. And, you know, uh, taking what's, not taking what's not yours, you know, I mean, so many times I've been in places where I'll just pick that up. And then I suddenly go, wait, I don't need to pick that up, you know, maybe somebody else is attached to it, you know? And so suddenly there's a whole way that we start looking through the Dharma eye at things and experiences that then can release it. And the same thing around our passions and sexuality, how in some ways they're very important. They're a biological nature, but they also can be problematic. So we have to, in some ways, stay awake to how all this works, and then our speech, we have to be really careful with that. We can be, and we can deceive ourselves by, trying to manipulate our speech about others, you know, and that gets kind of tricky. But, um, what you have to know about speech is, what is the intention? Is the intention not harming, or is it somehow to change what's there? So there is a manipulation that goes on. And I think you all know this, it's, this is not anything fancy. It's very plain, and that, we also know that, through the use of intoxicants, we're forgetful creatures, and so it really creates then, there's some great Tibetan little stories about someone who goes to a bar and and they drink, and then they end up breaking they say, I'm fine. And they break all 5 precepts anyway, you know. So, it's just something we have to be careful with, because it's what causes harm is heedlessness. And so heedlessness, can be simple in the sense of, you know, uh, and I'm not trying to advocate, that you become, totally abstain, because I know that that's unrealistic for some people. For some people, they have to abstain. I have a daughter who, spent time in her 20s and early 30s, and she couldn't do it. It just caused chaos, and so she has to completely abstain. And others probably in this room, who have been through the gauntlet of, whether it's addiction or whether it's just the heedlessness or carelessness that comes. So these are important. These are part of the wisdom factor of kind of getting, in some sense, we're trying to find, at one level, trying to find out who we are. And to find out who we are, we have to have explored a lot of different avenues and seen the conditioning involved in those. And then at some point, we really do. There is, I think it's innate in all human beings that there is the wisdom there. The wisdom of non-harming, the wisdom of really taking total care of what's going on, And I know it's always, this is wisdom is a big piece, but I keep going back to the language of the middle way, and recognize that somehow that is really true. Now, there's one big problem here. Can you guess what it is? Identity. Identifying, and it's tricky, because again, identity is it's how we relate to things. So, but also our practice in this particular, in all schools of Buddhism, is to thin the self out, And so how do you thin the self out? I was going to read a little piece from there's one of the great suttas is the Prajnaparamita, which is really the prajna is wisdom. And so it's the like paramita, the my mind. What's the word? Anyway, prajna is wisdom, and paramita is the I don't know. I can't think of it right now. The perfection. Yes, it is. And it's called, it's called the the Great Wisdom Heart Sutra. And this, there are many, I have a bunch of different ones here that I've used in different times that I've studied, and they're great, all of them. But this I thought was the simplest. Avalokita, an awakened one of great compassion, experienced the clear, deep truth of transcendent wisdom, of meditative awareness, clearly saw that all of the images, thoughts, feelings, and emotional states of ego mind are empty of any permanent self nature. Realizing this, he immediately transcended mental confusion and ego suffering and told Shariputra, remember that all manifested forms are no other than this emptiness. Emptiness is no other than all these manifested forms. Form is exactly emptiness. Emptiness is exactly form. All of our thoughts, feelings, concepts, and conscious states, the volitional actions are all like this. I could read on, but you get the point, you know? And one of the tricky words is the word emptiness, because I always thought that in the vernacular of the Western culture, I don't know if it was the best word because it's very definite, and yet in the Tibetan, when they talk about emptiness, it's more about the potential of everything happening. So it's like saying there's the emptiness is that it is infinite potential is another good translation, I think, of it, and so you have this possibility that all things, uh, everything arises in a sense out of nothing, and then we make name and form and create something out of it, and yet its origin wasn't something, and it's wonderful, the whole thing around. I think Adam mentioned this morning the 3 characteristics. Yeah. Okay. So, these characteristics are so fundamental to our seeing. And unfortunately, it is, that everything is impermanent. All states are confusing. And what's the third one? I forget right now. My mind. Anyway, it's okay. I know it. I've only been teaching it for 40 years, but it's also this thing about self, there's self is not something that's there. It is actually part of this cacophony of constantly changing objects. But the objects we begin to relate to is something that we create identity out of. And so we walk around, I'm John, I'm a neurotic, I have all this and all that, this history and that history and all this. And what's being said here is that you are more than that. And because you're more than that, then you no longer have to fixate and manipulate the identity. Not that the identity is going to go away, because as I said at the beginning, it's really about thinning out the identity. It's what we're in process of doing. And to me, that's the best language, because you can't jump to emptiness. You just have to slowly dissolve the attachment for the self and for the characteristics that are based on who you think you are, because we all have it. It's not like that's not part of growing. Is we create these identifiable states, then we come to Buddhism and they say, guess what? You know, that's not true. You know, and then you have to turn around and go, what do you mean it's not true? I am that, you know. Can I be something else? And the truth is you are that, you know, but it's the attachment to it that is the problem. If there's no attachment, then you can still have all your neurosis. I'm sorry, but you are very neurotic, and I'm quite aware of that. And I'm because I know myself, I am neurotic, and this is the functions of that that personal identity. But I also know that I can, you know, this is the thing about the duality. Awareness is always here. It's never anywhere else. You were born, you had it, you have it now. I don't know what happens when you die, by the way. I haven't got there yet. But, you know, I do know that we can begin to step back into the awareness more than the identity that happens with this, you know, it is constructed because it was constructed by your family history, your schools, your, you know, whatever your life experience has been, has created that identity. And here we're saying, oh no, if you just step back, you don't need it anymore. I mean, I know that, you know, as a teenager, I needed an identity to make a mess. And, but then at some point, you know, when I finally came to these practices, it was like, it was such a relief to think that I wasn't, I was no longer that I had created, you know, I mean, thanks to my parents and schools and friends and all that. And it's a great, great truth. So I'm going to ask if we can do a couple questions. And I think Adam has the microphone back there. And so I don't know, do any of you have any questions? Or no, you all know your identity. Douglas.
Hi, this is Douglas. When you're guiding the meditation and tuning us into our bodies, a question occurred to me. What keeps our bodies so warm? Why aren't we the ambient temperature around us? What's heating up our bodies?
Well, I think, yeah, a snake, a lizard, you know, depended on outer circumstances. We have we have the inner fire, you know.
Where is that?
You have to find it.
Hmm.
But there's blood flowing, there's thinking going on, there's heat being produced by your body.
I'm surprised I've never thought of this question before.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just dawned on me tonight.
It just dawned on you. Yes, well,
Yeah.
that's the way insight practice works.
So I have another question.
Yes.
That's more pertaining to wisdom factors and such.
Yes.
And I've been reading some Buddhist books.
Uh-oh.
And I wondered what the difference is between like awareness and the maybe it's a Tibetan term, Rigpa.
I'm not going to try to define Rigpa, but you know, we all born, we all have awareness. And the thing is, the awareness marries itself to the objects of experience, our senses, our thoughts, our feelings, our histories, or whatever. And that's what it does. And the objective here is that there's also something, I mean, awareness in its nature is it's completely pure. It has no problem with any of this. And so in some ways, it's us stepping out of the dualism of self and an experience or a thought or a feeling or emotion or something, is stepping back from it. And when we create that little bit of space, then suddenly the awareness has this capacity for freedom, which is what Rigpa is. So it's actually free of, you're free of the objects. And the more you train yourself in putting your attention more on the awareness and not so much on the things going on around you and your own psychology and your own body functions, then there is great truth in awakening.
Thank you for such a succinct answer. I like that.
Good.
And this is Robin over back in the Zoom room. If any of you guys have any questions online, you can go ahead and put up the hand emoji, and so we can call on you. And John, there isn't anyone raising their hand right now. So if there's someone in the hall, feel free to call on them.
I didn't hear that. So
Anyone in the hall have a question?
anyone in the hall? We're just looking for the no answer.
It looked like Vivian raised her hand.
I'm Vivian. So I have a problem with other people. That's a funny way to start. In terms of like, is my perception of another person, it seems so different than a perception of an object. And so, put this question. So if I'm just walking in the woods or, have my eyes closed and I'm observing my own thoughts, I can do that little distance that you're describing if I practice.
Mhm.
But when I'm, looking at Charlotte or, I don't see Charlotte as an object.
An object.
And so I lose the sense of
Yes, that's,
is-
well, this is that thing that why we train and where Rigpa's really great. It's just that we're trying to identify the space between. And what happens is the human being is so complex energetically, look at some of the Chinese, points in the body. Oh my God. It's like, and also then, we are energetic fields. And so there is the truth that those energetic fields have an effect on us. And it's really, and it's, some of it may be karma, but some of it is just a personality, or person's physical energy. And it's much more difficult to create that space, but also because these are trainings, to do, there are, gosh, I was remembering some of the workshops I went to where, we would do these things of creating a space between,
so it is a little bit more complicated with
It is more
human.
complicated. Human being complicated. We're very complicated. And yet, because awareness holds all of it, we can, even within the complexity of that, we can step back. And I think, I've spent a lot of times with different teachers in Asia, and most of them had the ability just to step back. And maybe that's why they were teachers, but they could step back and not be entranced or absorbed by the person's energy, you know. So that's cool.
I see Nicholas's hand up.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, John. May I ask a question?
You may.
Thank you so much, John. What I want to ask is this in relation to the 5 strengths that both you and Adam were teaching about this week. It seems to me that energy and faith are easier for myself to recognize. So basically, we live in a Western world here. What I learned from half of my life living in the West, I'm not saying that is the only way to look at it, but there is also this useful pragmatic quality of looking at things to try to recognize and grasp them somehow. So what I'm trying to say is that faith and energy are easy to or easier to recognize in myself. The gatherness and the mindfulness, I can understand that I need to work for them. In relation to wisdom, I'm at a loss of how to recognize and how to cultivate it by itself without saying, wisdom is going to be the result of samadhi and of gatherness and mindfulness. So what is your advice about how to recognize and cultivate wisdom itself as part of the mix?
That's a great question. And, it is true that wisdom, for instance, it's something that's, it can be noted, but it has to be cultivated. The same way the concentration, energy, and my brain, what? Mindfulness. What is that? Yes. Mindfulness and I'm spacing, but faith and wisdom go together, and energy and concentration go together, and mindfulness holds it all. And it's interesting that the faith, when it's verified and matured, that it has the capacity then to transform itself into wisdom. In the same way that energy, when it's adapted, and particularly in the sitting stuff, then what is it that happens is concentration. So they're results of. And then mindfulness, it in itself is purity. It's really just pure moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, and keeping that knowing there in those moments. But then there is the result of that, and I mentioned it on Wednesday night, is that the sampapajana, or the clear comprehension, which is the intelligence, which then is the precursor to wisdom. Because if you don't have that clear comprehension, then you don't have the ability to have the wisdom that's necessary. Because it really does boil down to, if the wisdom isn't there, you're going to screw up. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but anyway, it's true, and this is a practice, it's something that you don't just get. You have to do it over and over. And slowly but surely, one begins to understand these 5, when I look at them as powers, because they clarify the world. And then we see the nature of that self that it clings and wants to manipulate its reality or its circumstances. And we are more than that, you know. How's that?
Thank you, John. It's wonderful. And the last small thing, how do you define wisdom? Because there is another thing, like when people talk about the wisdom, everybody defines it differently or looks at it differently. So if I heard you correctly tonight, wisdom is something that emerges out of this clear comprehension, and clear comprehension emerges out of basically the practice of samadhi and mindfulness.
Well,
Or is
those
there another
five,
way?
yeah,
Sorry.
those five
Mhm.
are the precursors to wisdom. And wisdom itself is an innate truth that understands the middle way, understands the nature of, I'm going to use a big word, the nature of reality, you know. And, but that can be, you know, it's something we have to work towards. I wish it could be just instant. I still go back to remembering in New Delhi, Muktananda going around with this peacock feather and just kind of hitting people on the head and going, wow, and then it bounce up and down. And I thought, wow, couldn't be that difficult. I was wrong. But it's okay. You're going to be wrong.
Thank you very much, John.
You're very welcome.
All right, any questions here in the hall? Great.
Thank you, John. My name is George. One of the things that you said that I found very interesting was I'm not sure exactly how you put it, but the practice perhaps is to thin out the self
Yes.
as opposed to, I mean, I'll pick a word out of my own hat, eradicate the self or deny it utterly. Because I think that sometimes for myself, if I can use that term, I will fall into this dichotomy where there is a self or there's no self. There's no self, and so everything that manifests as a self is a problem. And that, you know, if I hit as I did, I went into the refrigerator, opened the door, and smacked my head on the door. But I didn't do that. You know, I didn't hit my head because I have no head, because there's no self. And it just seems like it's kind of when I get that way, that into that dichotomy, that duality,
That duality, that absolutes.
yeah, it becomes
Yes or no.
problematic. And I love that phrase, not one, not two. And it strikes me, and I'd like you to comment on, I would ask you to comment on this, is that it seems sometimes like the Dharma is pointing to the phenomena as it exists, as opposed to some theoretical concept. Oh, we've determined this, and therefore we're going to go out into the world and apply it. And could you speak a little bit to the relationship of phenomena and the Dharma? Because it does seem that when I kind of hold it that way, I can hold it more lightly, and I can kind of feel it more.
Yeah. Well, that's
Thank you.
the idea, to hold, you know, what we may think is truth or we may think is the dichotomy, whatever, hold it lightly. That's number one. And then I use this, to me, I would have loved to have been able to say, oh, I got rid of the self. But I didn't get rid of the self. The self, you know, it's part of the dualism. There is the self that needs to operate in the function of the world. It just has to be refined, you know. And also then there is the truth that that as you work on that, then the self begins to thin out. So it's the self no longer becomes a problem. It's just, you know, part of the function. And our problem is our attachment to our views, our opinions, our ideas, you know, our bodies, our sensations, all of that. You know? And we just simply have to, and that's why I say thin the self out. It's not, we're not going to get rid of the self. I'm sorry, you know, The Buddha maybe, maybe. But he also, while he was in the world, he was definitely a self, and a very, workable self, but it was a self. And that what we do is we try to thin it out so it doesn't cause us more pain and others more pain. And then we come back. Now, this is the last piece of that is that, I do believe if we could just rest in our hearts, that we would not cause harm. There would not be, we have such a culture of greed that there wouldn't be greed. I mean, at least it would be thinned or be less, and which hopefully would be less judgment, anger, and fear. Fear is incredible. You become afraid and then you react because that's your nature, and we are just fearful little kids walking around in these kind of mature big bodies. But as soon as that emotion hits us, then we are, it would be great to say, oh, well, then the Dharma would kick in. But no, we have to have instilled the Dharma. And that's what we're doing here, is trying to instill it so that we're going to make mistakes because we don't always know what tomorrow brings. But if we kind of stay with those precepts and we stay with the heart, because the heart knows, it knows, it's pretty cool, it has everything it needs. But we don't believe that. So how are we doing here?
I think probably about time for announcements. Unless anybody has a really pressing question.
I've been attending lectures by Geshe Lobsang Truso Trim in Auburn, and what he said is we just rent our bodies. It's not long term, so that's the
No,
way.
it has a date.
Hi, John. Can you repeat what she said? We couldn't quite hear it on Zoom.
Go ahead and say it again. Yeah,
Um,
it was Sultram. Yeah, Lama.
Geshe Lobsang Truso Trim in Auburn said we just rent our bodies. That is short term. So that's the way that he explained it. We're just borrowing a physical body.
That's right. That's all we're doing. And hopefully, you have a few miles more to go on it. Tim,
Oh yeah.
I like that concept of thinning it out, John. And I'm also thinking about, I just don't want to believe the story about myself. And I've just thought of the little story or simile that Thich Nhat Hanh said when he was in Yosemite and he watched the waterfalls coming over. And it came all from one river. And then as it was falling, there are all these little droplets.
breaks up.
And I just see that as the self that came from the no self. And while they're falling, there's those sparkly little ones on the outside bouncing off of the rocks. And so, I'm sort of cool. And there's the ones that are stuffed in the back in the dark and they're not so cool or feeling that way. And eventually all those drops come back to the river, come back to the one. And that's been, and I actually had that same vision in over in an ocean one time. And it was real clear to me that not so much rent, that I'm in this this temporary state.
You're a drop that's falling.
And
It's
every
gonna
once in a
hit
while,
the
I just,
ocean or the river and you'll
Yeah.
go back to nothing.
once in a while, I think I'm this really cool drop. And then other times I'm like this dismal. And it's all this, story that I have about myself. And I really like that. Just thin it out, Tim.
Just thin it out. It'll, it's gonna work out.
Well, I'll just be in
And
the river again.
You'll just be part of the river. It was always just the river.
Yes.
You broke up for a little while and
A-
walked around for a while and then you went back to
And,
the
and-
river.
and- and we still all are the river right
Yes,
now.
we are. As a collective, we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
The beauty of the Sangha,
Thanks, Tim.
So we are, we're kind of at that, and metta. Holy smoke. No smoke. Just holy. Okay. Just take a moment first to just kind of feel your body and, for me, listening to Allison, it was all the gratitude for all of you and for, all those that helped. It's been a big deal getting this together. And I'd like to thank the Buddha and Tara that they will sustain us as we continue here in this village temple. And just bringing attention to your heart. You are most precious. Your first love should be yourself. This truth that you've been given this rent-a-body for a certain amount of time. You've had this awareness of growth and care. And that we, one of my longtime friends who came up to Nevada City years and years ago, 20 years ago, Sylvia Borstein, we did a day long in Grass Valley. And she always said, there's really no difference between insight practice and metta, loving kindness practice, because ultimately they are the same. And so as we sit here, we are putting more emphasis on the loving kindness. But it is also something that is inherent when the preciousness and the precepts and the insight is matured, then there is this natural care, this natural love for yourself and all beings. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from any inner or outer harm. May I find ease of being. May whatever merit is accumulated through our gathering together like this, that it is for the benefit of beings everywhere, that they may benefit from our time together in our practice, so that ultimately beings everywhere may be free from judgment and fear and anger and all the poisons that can distort that good heart. May all beings be happy. They had a trouble. You know, you're so welcome.